You've seen it on the news from Ukraine, right? The entire battlefield is being transformed. Victory and defeat can now literally hinge on these swarms of small, cheap drones that see everything and can strike with incredible precision. It's a revolution in warfare, and it brings up a huge question for us. So who is actually building these game-changing machines? Well, the answer, it's probably not who you think. And for the United States, it reveals a massive, massive strategic challenge.
Get this, somewhere between 80 and 90%. That's the share of the global market for small drones controlled by just one country, China. America is now in a race against time to rebuild its own drone industry, basically from the ground up, and the clock is ticking.
Okay, so how in the world did we get here? How did one single country manage to build a near monopoly on a technology that is completely reshaping modern conflict? Well, a huge piece of that puzzle comes down to one company, DJI. You've probably heard of them. They alone control about 70% of the entire market. And this was no accident. It was the result of massive state support from the Chinese government and just incredible economies of scale, which let them sell drones at prices that basically nobody else could match. But here's the thing. The problem runs so much deeper than just the finished drones. We're talking about almost every single critical component inside of them, from the brushless motors that spin the props, to the batteries, to the tiny flight controllers that act as the brain, the whole supply chain. It all leads back to China. This quote from a former White House supply chain advisor really puts it bluntly. This dependency, it creates a massive national security risk. U.S. officials have warned that Beijing could, in theory, just halt exports and shut down the global drone industry for up to a year. So you see, this isn't just a market issue. It's a huge strategic vulnerability. So the solution seems pretty simple, right? Just start building drones in America. Well, that brings us to the very core of the dilemma, the absolutely staggering cost of making things here at home. I mean, the difference is just wild. A capable tactical quadcopter imported from China might set you back around $2,000. But a similar drone built in the US and approved for military use, you're looking at anywhere from 5 to 10 times that amount. We're talking $10,000 to $20,000, maybe even more. And when you break it down part by part, the gap becomes a chasm. A motor might cost $15 from a mass producer in China, but over $100 from a US supplier. And for the complex electronics, the cost can be 10 or even 100 times higher when you source them domestically. It's just incredible. So what's driving this gigantic cost difference? Well, it's a whole mix of things. U.S. labor is more expensive for one, and American companies just don't have the massive economies of scale that China has from serving a global consumer market. But it's also about proximity. In China, a factory can get parts from a supplier right next door. And on top of all that, building to strict U.S. military security standards adds a whole lot more cost. But even with all these challenges, a new American drone industry is starting to take shape. So let's take a look at the ecosystem of companies that are stepping up to try and close this critical manufacturing gap. You know, it's a really diverse group that's emerging. You've got dedicated drone companies like Skydio, which are already supplying the military. Then there are these agile startups focusing on the kind of nimble first-person view, or FPV drones that we're seeing in Ukraine. And of course, you have the big defense contractors and the broader electronics industry, all of which could play a part in powering this new ecosystem.
But here's the thing. All of these companies, they all say the same thing. To succeed, they need one thing above all else: large, guaranteed orders from the government. Without that certainty, it's just about impossible to justify the massive investment needed to build factories, hire workers, and finally get the scale you need to bring those prices down. Okay, but building the drones, that's only half the battle. The U.S. military also has to train a new generation of soldiers to fly them, to fix them, and to fight with them. This is the human hardware. And the skill set they need is just fascinating. It's this unique blend of what trainers call gamer skills and maker skills. Operators need the hand-eye coordination of a video gamer for that precision piloting, but they also need the technical know-how to build, troubleshoot, and repair their drones right there on the battlefield. They have to be both a pilot and a technician.
A perfect example of this whole new philosophy is the Army's Rusk course. Here, special operations soldiers aren't just taught how to fly a drone, they're taught how to build one from a box of parts. This gives them this incredibly deep understanding of the technology, so they can troubleshoot, they can repair, and they can even innovate under the extreme pressure of combat. And what's the reaction from the young soldiers getting this training? This quote just says it all. There's a real, genuine enthusiasm. For a generation that grew up with video games and smartphones, this technology feels totally natural, and they are absolutely embracing it. All right, let's zoom out for a second. Why does all of this matter so much? What are the real long-term stakes for the United States as we look toward the end of this decade? First and foremost, it's about supply security. Successfully bringing drone production back home closes a glaring national security vulnerability. It means the U.S. can build what it needs, when it needs it, without having to ask permission from a strategic competitor. Second, it's about military readiness for the future of war. Any major conflict is going to consume what they call attritable systems, basically drones that are cheap enough to be lost in combat, at an incredible rate. A domestic industrial base is really the only way to produce and replace these on the massive scale that would be required. And finally, this whole race is about technological leadership. Rebuilding this industry isn't just some defense project. It's about making sure the United States stays at the absolute cutting edge of 21st century tech, like AI, autonomy, and advanced manufacturing. It's really about owning the future. So make no mistake, the drone revolution isn't coming. It is already here. The challenge for the U.S. is immense, touching on economics, technology, military strategy, the whole shebang. The only question that remains is whether it can mobilize its industrial power to build its way to the front of this incredibly high-stakes race.